Welcome to the Old Mecanico Show. We hope you stick around. Thank you for giving us a view. What are we learning today? We're learning about the fluids. Which fluids? The fluids under your hood. The three most common fluids in a particular order are brake fluid, automatic transmission fluid, and power steering fluid. Now, I put brake fluid at the top because 99.99% of vehicles still use brake fluid. I did a little research. What do they call it? Brake by wire. The brakes are going electric. Now, most late model, which means the latest thing out, have electric parking brakes, but we're not talking about that. Anyway, the brake fluid. Look at it in the master cylinder. It starts off so clean. The brake fluid is nice and clear. Do you see it inside the master cylinder? There, the brake fluid. Now the brake fluid's also at each of the wheels, but we're going to keep our attention on the master cylinder reservoir, where the brake fluid is. You see how clean it is? Well, after time, the brake fluid's going to change color. It's going to get dark. It's going to get dirty. And I'm going to ask you, why does the brake fluid get dirty? And the answer is not dirt. Why does the automatic transmission fluid turn dark? And don't say dirt. Why does the power steering fluid turn dark, dirty? And don't say dirt. Dirt does not contaminate the fluids. They're all sealed. There may be a little bitty vent on a couple of them, but it is not dirt that contaminates the brake fluid. Can you figure out why the brake fluids and the rest of the fluids change color to where they have to be changed? Let me give you a recent personal experience I had. This is true on my new project, my 95 Lexus SC300. I had started doing some work, and all of a sudden, I lost the power steering fluid with no warning. And then I've got my senses up. I could smell that fluid leaking. Sure enough, all of a sudden, the power steering fluid leaked. But it leaked out the reservoir, and I knew there was a screen, and I hadn't got around to it, but my dirty power steering fluid caused my steering to stop. Dirty brake fluid is going to deteriorate all the components of the brakes. Have you figured out why do the fluids look dirty? Heat. Heat is the enemy. But on our next breath, heat is our friend. Heat is what gives us the energy to propel our vehicle. Through the combustion of the air fuel inside the engine, we harness the heat and we push those vehicles down the road. We move them. It's a fine line between that friend and foe. Heat is our friend, but heat is the enemy. So what are we going to do about these fluids? Well, we're going to try and make them last longer. Well, what can we do? 4 answers. The first thing is easy. You should be able to do this. If you stick around, it'll all make sense. You think you can come up with a bottle of Windex or other spray cleaner? You think you can come up with a garden hose? You don't even need a nozzle, and I recommend you not. We'll have to have some water. What's the first thing we're going to do to help minimize the heat is the enemy to the fluids? We're going to make sure that all the heat exchangers are clean. Well, what's that? What's a heat exchanger? Well, there's several types. The first one should come to mind is the radiator to help remove the heat from the coolant. The one in front of it is called the AC condenser. It also removes the heat from the refrigerant. There's going to be power steering fluid coolers. There's going to be automatic transmission fluid coolers. There's coolers that remove the heat from the different fluids because heat is the enemy. So what are we going to do with this and this? We're going to clean the heat exchangers, and we're going to have to go to the hood so I can show you that. Unfortunately, every car is different, and some of them are so easy and the opposite. Some of them can be very, very difficult. Let me convince you about this cleaning of the heat exchangers. Now I'm going to change the subject just a little bit. I'm going to ask you, on the outside of your vehicle. Why does your car get dirty? Now you can say dirt. Yes, the dirt, the dust, throw in a little rain, and we got a messy, dirty car. Look at that car. First, it starts off so clean, and we like to keep it that way, but there's nothing we can do. Nothing. Even if we put it in the garage, it's going to get dirty. Cars get dirty because of dirt. Good. Guess what else gets dirty from dirt? The heat exchangers. When was the last time you cleaned a heat exchanger? Never? Well, don't listen. I don't want you to have car trouble, but some of you might deserve car trouble. Cleaning all the heat exchangers will make them more efficient. The dust and dirt that collects in the fins and the passages of the condenser, the radiators, the coolers, the lines, whatever you want to call them, this film of dust brings down the efficiency. To me, every 1/10 of a degree counts. You know, we live here in South Texas and it's hot as can be, but I don't care where you are. Your car is going to get dirty of dirt. The heat exchangers are going to get dirty of dirt. And yes, you can clean your heat exchangers, and that's the first thing that we're going to do. I'm going to show you how to clean your heat exchangers. Thanks for sticking around, folks. Come on, let me show you how easy it is. I swear the hardest part is getting you to open the hood. Hey, I don't know why it's so hard for people to want to look under their hood. But anyway, let's take a look. Right over here. Right there up front. Here's our first heat exchanger. This is a smaller one. This is for the power steering fluid. Trust me. Okay, here's another heat exchanger. This is called the AC condenser. This is another heat exchanger. I know they don't look that bad, but I want you to look on top of the engine. I want you to notice that there's dust on there. In fact, there is dust everywhere. Okay? And the dust is on the heat exchangers, and it is the dust that interferes with the efficiency of the cooler. So what are we going to do about it? Well, before we get too busy doing it, we're going to try to find the radiator. It's easy. The easiest one to see is the condenser. But over here we have another one. This could be an automatic transmission cooler, but on this particular vehicle it's for the power steering. Okay, it's for the power steering. You're going to have to try to get a view of the radiator. The radiator is going to be the most limited heat exchanger that you can see on some vehicles. Sometimes if you take a look around, you might have a little peek of it down in there and on the other side. So first we open the hood. That's the hard part, I swear. We look to see what we got, because I'm going to have to show you another example. Every vehicle is so different. I select this particular one because it's the easiest one. Everything is right there. You can see it. Okay, so now the next thing we do before we start spraying water, we're going to pay attention to some of the electrical devices. We don't want to soak the electrical devices. We can get them a little wet, but we don't want to splash a bunch of water on anything electrical. It's usually pretty clear of electrical devices, but there's been some times I've seen a little electronic module get damaged by the water, and no, we don't want to do that. All right, be sure you can see this. All right, we don't want a sprayer, okay, because that's going to spray too much. This is just going to be a gentle flow of wash or rinse or both. We don't need this, so don't get ready to spray it like that. I'm going to turn this on just a little bit. Let me tell you what I'm going to do, and then we'll do it. I'm going to get the heat exchangers wet. Then I'm going to take the Windex and I'm going to spray it. And then I'm going to wait 1 minute. Here, let me turn the water on. We got some water. I get the heat exchangers wet. It's like a car wash. Nothing's going to go wrong here. You stay away from the electrical. This is going to help so many things. The fluids, the engine, the air conditioning. It's going to help so many things. I get the heat exchangers wet. All right, now I'll turn the water off. Once the heat exchangers are wet, any kind of soap, it doesn't have to be this one. And you know what you're gonna do. You're gonna spray, just like that. You're gonna spray the heat exchangers, okay? And we're gonna let that soak for about a minute. Now, we always like to do something productive. We don't stand around and do nothing. This is a good time to start our automotive jokes. What do you get if you stand behind the car? Exhausted. What do you get if you stand in front of the car? Tired. Get it? Tired, exhausted. What's the difference between a Ford Mustang and a porcupine? Porcupine's got the pricks on the outside. Okay, so for about a minute, we let it soak. The soak time is important. Now what am I going to do? I'm going to rinse it off. Maybe, no, I don't want to encourage you to spray. Just a gentle rinse is all that's needed. We don't need to spray. We just need to rinse. And I'm just going to rinse just like this. I'm going to rinse the heat exchangers. There's the AC condenser. Here's the power steering fluid. Stay away from that horn. If you want to do an extra good job, that was good what we did. But if you want to do a little bit more, put some more soap on it. Let it soak just another minute and then rinse it off. This is very helpful. But now, okay folks, that was the easy one. Let's do another one. And unfortunately, they're not all that easy. Here's an example of how some heat exchangers can hardly be seen from underneath the hood. I'll even shine the light in there to see if you can see anything, but it's actually got a cover. You cannot see any of the heat exchangers on this particular vehicle, but don't give up. Here's what we're going to have to do. It takes more effort, but we can do it. Through these openings, you can now start to see the heat exchangers. It's a little bit more trouble, right? But you can do it. You can still do it. It's a little bit more trouble, but it still needs it. And it's worth it. A little bit of preventive maintenance goes a long way. I hope you're starting to understand how important these are. Let's finish up. Number 2, what else can we do to keep off that foe of the heat? It's a fine line. Well, let's look at that line. Where is that line? It's on your instrument panel. It's called your temperature gauge. I know you look at your fuel gauge. Could you give up a few seconds to look over at the temperature gauge? The temperature gauge is very important. It's probably the second most important gauge on the cluster. Sure, you look at the gas gauge, but let's get into the habit of paying attention to the temperature gauge. Halfway, in my opinion, is too much. Halfway up the gauge is the limit. I prefer anything below the halfway on the gauge. Anything above the halfway on the gauge and you're about to blow your head gasket. And it's going to blow when you blow your gaskets. What am I talking about? Overheating the engine, overheating the transmission, overheating the air conditioning. Here we go again. It's a fine, fine line. That line wasn't so fine 40, 50 years ago. The way the vehicles are engineered today and they run them. I remember I used to put the thermostats in 160 degrees. Normal engine operating temperature was less than 200, 160, 170, 180. Today, normal operating temperature is at least 200. And yeah, we're very close to boiling. Why do they run them so hot? Who knows? Why do they run the engines so hot? That's a way to clean up the emissions. That's one of the easiest ways, but it's that fine line between our friend and our foe. The friend that provides the energy to move the vehicle, but the same element The heat is what's going to destroy every single fluid underneath the hood. So we're going to clean the heat exchangers. We're going to pay attention to the temperature gauge. If that gauge is not less than half, you need to do something about it. What you're going to do about it? You're going to do a cooling system tune-up. I'm not encouraging you to do it. You've heard of tune-ups, like as in spark plugs, right? Wires, coils, fuel injector cleaning. Have you ever heard of a cooling system tune-up? There's a couple of things that are involved. The obvious is changing the coolant. Changing the coolant is so important. Most of you do an okay job of changing your oil, but many of you do not change your coolant. Antifreeze. Even if there's no cold front coming, it's important to change your coolant because the coolant has anti-corrosive rust inhibitors, and those inhibitors deteriorate. They're only good for a few years. The antifreeze will protect you from freezing, but the corrosion inhibitors have deteriorated. Everything's going to start to deteriorate, starting with the radiator, the water pump, the freeze plug, the hoses, all because you didn't change your coolant. The second thing, part of the cooling system tune-up, is to change the thermostat. Once again, a little personal experience. Just out of nowhere, I'm out of town driving in a vehicle, doesn't matter. Everything is fine until all of a sudden I notice the AC's not working, and the next thing I know there's steam coming out of the hood. With zero warning, those thermostats will stick. And you're going to melt that engine in about 2 minutes. Changing the thermostat before it messes up. Changing the antifreeze before it deteriorates it. And what else can we do? There's one more thing. You can minimize extended idle. What's that? Well, that's the engine idling without you moving. Now, I know you cannot avoid it in traffic, but there's plenty of situations that you can avoid it. What difference does it make? I call it the ram air. When the vehicle is moving, 30 miles, 40 miles, 50 miles an hour wind, that wind that is coming in through the grill or whatever you want to call it, is such a help. It is such a help for the heat exchangers to do their job. When the vehicle is moving, the heat exchangers do not struggle to do their job. But when you're at a stop or a drive-through and you're at idle, I'm going to make sure you understand. Zero ram air. Strike number one. Minimal RPM, which means minimal oil pressure. Strike two. Along with the minimal RPM is minimal coolant circulation. Strike three. You're almost out. You are out. Some of you might suspect, I wonder if this is bad. Yes. Extended idle, where the vehicle is not moving, is the fourth thing that you can try to minimize in. Let us summarize here. Every single fluid under the hood will become deteriorated and will have to get changed, or bigger problems are coming, whether it's the transmission fluid, the brake fluid, the power steering fluid, whatever fluid's underneath the hood, it's going to deteriorate from heat. So what can we do? 4 answers. We can make sure our heat exchangers are clean. You should be able to do that. The hardest part is getting you to open that darn hood. What's the second thing you're going to do? You're going to pay a little more close attention to that needle on the temperature gauge. You want it below half. To me, half's too much. Something's wrong. Fix it. Okay? We're also going to try to minimize extended idle, and that very, very important tune-up. The cooling system tune-up. Change the coolant, put some thermostat on there, make sure there's no leaks. You're good for another bunch of miles. Once again, folks, if you made it this far, we appreciate it. Thank you, folks. Thank you so much for the viewing. And you know what we like. If possible, well, before we get, yes, the subscription, Comments. I can hardly wait to read comments. Please, somebody say something about something. Again, folks, come on back. Let me help you out.